friends, and welcome to AHA to Go. Today we're going to be doing a Mind Your Masters project, and we are going to study and learn about Jean-Michel Basquiat. He's a great street artist and expressive painter, and we're going to be working on a project inspired by his style. If you'd like to learn more about Jean-Michel and his life, I've included some fun facts on your instruction sheet, as well as some additional resources for videos and other sites that have lots of great information about this amazing artist. Let's get started. We're going to work on a painting inspired by the artwork of Jean-Michel Basquiat. Jean-Michel is an artist who was known for his paintings as well as some graffiti street art. He is someone who used bold colors and imagery. You'll see a lot of anatomy in his paintings that comes out because that was one of his big interests, as well as mark making that is full of energy. One of my favorite things about Jean-Michel's artwork, which you're seeing some images of right now, is you could really get a feeling of him as a person by looking at his artwork. You could see what he was going through as a person and in his own life because he put that into his brushes and into his mark making. One other fun thing that he would include is a bunch of text. So as you look at his paintings and see his work, you might see some different text pop out in the backgrounds or in the foreground of his work. Sometimes these were inspired by specific messages he wanted to send. Other times it would be inspired by things he had laying around the studio, including comic books. So to make this project, we have a piece of canvas, a Sharpie, a brush, and a handful of acrylic paints. Let's get started. For our first step, we are going to mix up some of our colors. So in order to do that, I've gotten myself a little cup of water that I can use to clean my brush in between mixing. And if you have a palette or if you have a little piece of glass or something you'd like to mix your colors onto, that would be great. I'm just going to use the lids of all of these paint containers. Okay, so I want to give myself a full range of colors. So that means I'm going to take my primary colors, red, blue, and yellow, and mix them together to create my secondary colors. So up first, we're going to do green. And as a good rule of thumb, it's better to have more of the lighter color, or to start with your lighter color and add little bits of the darker color into it until you get that shade. Because I'm going into a different color, I'm going to rinse my brush really well until it comes off clean when I wipe it on a paper towel. Okay. Now I'm going to use a little bit of blue. I'm going to start with that, see how it looks, and go from there. If it looks more like a yellow-green, I'll add more blue. And if it looks a little too dark or a little too blue, I'm obviously going to add more yellow. Just keep in mind the yellow is not quite as strong of a pigment as blue. Blue goes a long way, and that's true for whatever color you're mixing. I actually like this green pretty well, and I'm not too worried if I still have some streaks of blue or yellow in there. That's just fine. Sometimes having a little bit of a streak of the other color or of the components of your new color adds some interest to your painting. Okay, so I've got myself a green. Next, we're going to move on, and I'm going to make a purple using red and blue. So again, blue is a really strong pigment, so I'm going to start with red, and I know it's going to take more red than blue to create a shade of purple. And since I know my next color is going to be orange, and my brush is already dirty with red, I'm just going to add a little bit of red to get ready for my next step. Be sure when you're mixing colors, you leave enough of those primary colors in your containers so that you can still use red, blue, or yellow if you'd like. It's also a good reason for why we clean our brush. I don't want to contaminate those colors as I'm mixing new ones. Okay, getting back to my purple, I've got red as the base, and I'm going to add a little bit of blue to it. I'm just going to start with a little bit, see how that mixes, and go from there. A lot of things with art are just like that. You may not nail it or you may not get it right on the first try, but the best part about art is you can always keep going back into it until you get that desired result. Okay, so this looks pretty red to me, so I'm gonna add a little bit more blue and try to avoid, again, mixing my colors too much. I don't wanna contaminate my primary colors. And as I'm adding more blue, it's taking on less of a brown color with all that red in there and turning more purple. And it's also good to note as you're mixing, like this is a really pretty brown color. And I may not push it too much more with the blue to get like a traditional rainbow style purple, because I actually really like this color that's coming out. So I'm gonna go with it. If I wanted a lighter purple, I would add some white paint to this. And if I wanted a darker hue or darker purple, I would add black. Okay, a little bit more brown than purple, that's okay. I'm gonna go with it. And for our last color, we're gonna use the red that we already laid out the previous step. And now I'm gonna add some yellow to it to create an orange color. And you can see because that red is a stronger pigment than the yellow, my orange is going to be a little bit more what I would describe as a red orange. If I want to change that, I can add more and more yellow until I get the hue that I'm looking for. But again, I'm not going for rainbow colors here. I'm kind of just mixing them until I see a color come out that I like. Yeah, there we go. Okay, and now that I've gotten some colors mixed up, if I wanted to, like let's say I wanted to make a lighter orange. I'm gonna take my white, and anytime you're making a color lighter by adding white paint to it, it's a good idea to start with a clump of white paint and add a very little amount of that new or that darker color that you're trying to lighten up. White is something that you need a lot of in order to truly lighten up a tone, and I'll show you what I mean. Started with a little bit of white here, and let's see, I'm gonna do a little bit of orange. So I'm just gonna take what's on the edge here and add that in to start. And I really only filled my brush up with a little bit of that orange, but you can see how much power that has behind it. And now that white paint has taken on a whole new shade. Kind of a nice skin tone color. Okay, so I like the options that I have here. Now what I'm gonna do is, in the style of Jean-Michel, I'm just gonna lay some paint on there however I'm feeling it. I'm not gonna think too much about keeping my paint in certain shapes. I want my brush marks or my brush strokes to show a lot of emotion and energy behind them. Now, if I was wanting to be very careful about mixing colors here, I would definitely rinse my brush in between all of these different colors that I'm adding. But for me, I don't mind a little bit of color mixing. You can see I've got some of those streaks from the previous color coming in on this green spot that I'm laying, and I think that's pretty cool. So I recommend using anywhere between 3 and 5 different colors. If I was doing a landscape, I might start by laying a full background of color. For this project, I'm, again, just letting my intuition take over. If I feel like I want to add some more purple in a certain spot, I'm going to go for it. There is no right or wrong way. And it's okay to let your paintbrush pick up color from other areas that you've already painted. One tip is to keep your brush strokes nice and thin. If I have too much paint on my brush, it's gonna take forever for this to dry, which might be what you're going for. If you want a background that has more texture, you might use more paint with each brush stroke, but just keep in mind, the more paint that you apply, the more time it's gonna take to dry. For a painting like this, I would say anywhere between 3 and 5 colors is a good spot for your background. If you've laid 3 colors and you like the way it looks, go with it. Again, there's no right or wrong answer. This is your painting. And if you decide you want to use 10 colors in the background, there are no rules. Use 10 colors. It's up to you. Okay, and just to prove to you, you don't always have to be a rule follower. I use 6 for this project. So now that I've got my color set, I'm gonna let my painting or my background dry, and then I'm gonna return to it to add the next step. Now that my background is dry to the touch, almost, what I'm gonna do is take a darker color than what my background is showing to create the overall shape for my portrait. And this doesn't have to be an exact portrait. If you notice from the images that we looked at of Jean-Michel's work, he really just takes inspiration from all of these anatomical forms, and that's just a fancy word for your body. So I'm gonna use black as a starting point to map out just a general shape. Now, if you wanna do your whole body, go for it. You could draw a full body portrait. I think for me, I'm just gonna focus on my head and shoulders. So I am going to start, I'm not gonna think about it too much, and just lay down some generalized shapes for my portrait. So this round shape, I'm gonna use for my face. If you have a different shape for your face, like maybe you're more of an oval, don't be afraid to exaggerate that on this. Again, it doesn't have to be a perfect portrait. It doesn't have to show you exactly as you are. You just want to get a good feel for it. Okay, so I've made a nice rounded shape for my face, and now I'm going to add some shoulders. Maybe I'm turned to the side, and you could have a situation, which Jean-Michel did a lot of this, where maybe my shoulders are turned at an angle, but my face is full on, just kind of playing with the orientation, trying to make people see something that maybe they don't expect. And I've got long wavy hair, so I am just gonna do some general long wavy shapes to help demonstrate that. You can see some of my brush strokes are a little full of paint. Some of them are much less so and show more of the background color. There is no right or wrong, and you keep going until you feel like you've gotten to a stopping point. And I like that shape. I don't want to cover too much of my background because I actually like what's going on there. So I'm gonna let this dry and then come back to it to add some details. One cool tip, and one thing that Jean-Michel did a lot of, so we should practice that technique in this portrait, is he would actually use a hard, like a different object that didn't have paint on it to carve into the paint almost. And I'm gonna show you what I mean. So just to define some of these shapes, like maybe I wanna show that this is really my shoulder and my arm comes off from that. I'm just gonna use the back side of my paintbrush, almost like I would a pencil, and define some of these lines. Maybe I've got one in the hair. You don't have to get too exact with it or overthink it. Just throw a mark where you're feeling it and see where the portrait takes you. Okay, I like the way that looks. I'm gonna clean my brush, let that dry, and then I'll come back into it to add some details. Okay, now that I have my background dried, I'm gonna go in and just add some features. Think about eyes, think about a nose, a mouth. Again, it doesn't have to be realistic. Maybe you're somebody who really likes the color of their eyes or the shape of their nose. Anything that you like about yourself, think about exaggerating a little bit in this portrait. So I'm gonna try to make kind of a blue-green hazel color. So that's what color my eyes are. And I'm really gonna highlight that. And again, I'm not thinking too much about the exact shape. I just wanna lay down some fun, expressive brush marks and bright colors. I'm also just gonna take an opportunity here to add a different color on and maybe help separate my shirt from the rest of my body here. Maybe I want to add just a suggestion of a mouth. I kind of like that sideways grin. And again, I'm not going realistic here. I'm going with what I feel. Maybe I'll add some extra details for my hair. Whatever it is you want. Don't be afraid to mix your colors. You're more than welcome to keep your water dish close so that you can clean off your brush stroke in between colors. But as I mentioned earlier, I actually don't mind leaving some of the colors on my brush. I think it helps add some depth to my final portrait. And just like I did with my background, I'm gonna flip my brush over and use that to scratch away at some of these marks that I've made. It's a little tougher to see since I laid down black as my middle ground color here. But it's a good way to help define some shapes and just add a little bit of a visual interest to your portrait. Okay, I could go in and add more if I wanted to, maybe do more hair. I could even add some shapes in the background, like maybe I wanted to show my brain above my head. If I wanted to, I could keep pushing into it, but I actually like the way this looks now. So I'm gonna let this dry and then move on to our last step. Now the last step is going to be incorporating text into the background. So as you're waiting for this layer of paint to dry, I want you to start thinking about some different things that you might write. As I mentioned earlier, Jean-Michel would do a couple of different things. Sometimes he would write words or include text to spread a certain message, whatever that message is. And other times he would surround his studio or surround his studio floor with comic books, with textbooks, newspapers, print ads, anything that had text in it, and he would pull certain words that jumped out at him. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go grab a few pieces of paper we have, a couple of books, maybe a t-shirt, and I'm just going to start writing and practicing and see what marks I like the most. And then I'm gonna add them into my portrait wherever I feel like putting it. All right, I'll see you back when we're ready for that final step. All right, so now my painting is dried and I'm going to do the last step, which is using my Sharpie to incorporate some text into my painting. And I mentioned earlier that Jean-Michel would like to surround himself with all different kinds of text, comic books, ads, all different kinds of things, and just see what words pop out at him. So I'm kind of doing the same thing. I'm just looking at what I have around me, and I'm just gonna write some words and see if there's anything that I like the look of. The Sharpie that you guys have in your kit has 2 different tips. So I want you to play with both sides. Try maybe using the fatter tip to create some marks and see what looks best to you. All right, so I think I'm just gonna go for it. The first word, I like how this spark turned out, and I liked using the thicker or fatter side of this marker. You can see I don't really mind if it gets on my subject. Now that I have a really large piece of text, I might go in with this smaller point and add in a couple more words. Maybe it's going off of your canvas a little bit. Again, there's no right or wrong way. And the last thing I'm gonna do, because I have decided that I'm done, and you can keep filling it up if you want. Maybe you only want to put one word. It's your painting. Make it however you'd like. The last bit I'm gonna do is sign it, and I would suggest you do the same. And there it is. That is our Jean-Michel Basquiat inspired painting. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you all had as much fun making your Jean-Michel Basquiat inspired painting as I did. I know I learned a little something in my research, and I'm really happy with how the painting came out. Thank you as always for supporting the AHA School. We'll see you next time.